I am unashamed. What about you?
That,
Everything centers. I've not watched any of them that didn't bring up. Is the coffee made? You gonna make us a cup of coffee? Do we have any? I mean, and it's like gold. When they were traveling out across the West and fighting in between skirmishes with the Indians, you said you got the coffee made? Yep. Let's sit down and have a cup. So coffee was a big deal in all the movies, the way they're portrayed. Now, the why of that, I'm not quite sure, but it's in every one of them.
you might have stumbled up on something, because I used to say most good movies that I've seen, they start off with water. Somewhere in the opening scene, it'll be water.
Yeah.
And I'm like, here.
But
But
think
now
about it.
you're saying it's coffee on the Westerns. I never
Think
thought
about it. We're
that.
traveling across the wilderness, taming the West.
Hold
I'm
on,
trying to
he's
figure
right.
out
Al,
what kind of train they had hauling the coffee out there, because they all had it, every last one of them. I don't know whether it's just in the movies or really they drank a lot of coffee. But how did you get there in the middle of nowhere in a covered wagon? Make sure you got the coffee.
No coffee, no trip.
No coffee, no trip. Where's the coffee?
I'm going to now put that into because I watch old Westerns too.
Have you noticed that?
I hadn't noticed it, but
You watch
It
them. Every
seems-
one of them has a coffee scene.
You've made-
most of them more than 3 or 4 or 5, 6 times. No matter what, who was getting killed, stringing them up. We're going to go hang him. We're fighting the Indians. We can't cross the river. Break out the coffee. Break out the coffee.
I do remember that in the
Quite a bit of liquor, but it was coffee and whiskey.
I was been saying
Those were
a
the
lot of
two
whiskey was in there,
motivating
too.
foodstuffs that you had to have if we're going to tame the West. I've been watching them. I
So where you going?
sip the coffee drink.
The coffee. All right,
Things
well,
haven't changed. We're in the wilderness of sin, and you say that y'all keep the pot going all the time. It
I
keeps
will
going.
say this: every Bible study that I've had in the last, I
what
would
was
say,
the centerpiece?
10 years, I get my Bible. They're on their way,
Yeah,
and I make a pot of coffee.
there you go.
No matter what the hour is,
There you go.
whether it's midnight.
Arrows are raining down from the bluffs, but you in there, you got the coffee, and a lot of bullet holes in coffee. The bucket. Pew! They shoot. That's where the bullet hits. Right there, all gathered around the coffee. The shots ring out. Good night. They got a coffee pot with a hole in it now.
I would have said a pot of beans, probably more than the coffee, because you remember those. That is the coffee maker.
Yeah, but some
You
rough
remember
looking
the
girl.
Trinity?
Is that what I'm hearing?
You remember the Trinity movies? Yeah, this is what started this. I came in here, and we hadn't been here in a couple days, and somebody had put way too much coffee in the coffee part, and
Must have been the new guy.
we-
The new guy.
Yeah, was that you? No, he wasn't here last time. Okay, so then when I
That was the
opened
other
it,
guy.
it had like carterized into just something that's because we've told this before, but you put as much coffee as possible in the filter.
As much as it will hold.
Yeah.
Almost running over.
I mean, in fact, we could do a whole section about how you came about the world's largest coffee filters, which you gave me 1,000 of them, and I appreciate it. But I've looked across the globe for them, and somehow you got them. So, but I had to clean that out, and you were, I don't know, the next thing you
I
know.
put a man on that task, Dan the eunuch, and to his credit, he, when I looked at what he had 2 boxes. I mean, it was huge boxes.
Oh, I couldn't believe
enough
it.
coffee filters to last the rest of my life. He got them, and
Well,
I
when
gave
I
some
went,
of them to you.
yeah, when I went down there and you had them in a secret hiding place, and you brought them up, he has thousands.
Yeah, Dan,
He
Dan
handed
did
me
that.
1,000, and I'm
I
like,
said, Dan, you reckon that's enough to hold us? He said, well, I thought that you didn't want to run out of them. I said, well, I'll tell you what, you did well. But it took him several weeks
yeah.
to locate.
I mean, Al, it's such a
Well,
supply.
Dan is like Dan is like Red on Shawshank Redemption. He's a man who knows how to find things, except the difference in Red and Dan is Dan knows how to find things in bulk.
and
Yeah.
bulk,
He's
that
a
is
bulk
I
it.
mean,
man.
this is the amount he has is like a will leaving amount. It's
Yeah.
like the land, the houses. There's tens of thousands of oversized coffee filters up under the bottom 3 cabinets where you usually put pans. No, it's coffee filter. I couldn't believe it. I was like, the man has he has acquired quite.
We're not running out of coffee filters.
But they got to.
You know, you
in
can
this
put a lot
life
of
or the
coffee
next.
filters, if you stack them on top of one another and it stands up that high, that's years.
Well, Phil, but when you handed me them, I was so excited. But it's revolutionized my coffee making process every morning the last month since he gave them to me, because you're not going to fill it up. So and it's a lot cleaner because you don't have what this happens. What happens is we want strong coffee, so we put as much coffee in there. But the filters are like so small.
Oh, yeah.
Which may be why like restaurant and convenience store coffee is so weak, because they don't have big enough filter.
terrible.
It's not the coffee, it's the filter.
It won't hold enough coffee.
Won't hold enough coffee.
Yep.
And so, well, we corrected that problem. So we need to add that to our Western wares is to notice the coffee. I was going to say about the beans, because those trendy movies, you know, dude's always eating, but he always ate the whole pan of beans.
Yep.
Now, whether you're acting or in real life, if you eat an entire black iron skillet of beans, that's impressive. And he did it in like 60 seconds.
Yep. Yeah, I've seen
And I
it.
thought, boy, I'd hate to be on that set the rest of the day.
Yeah.
Well, I think about around the old campfire, you know, after about an hour or two of that, all the old cow hands, that's going to
Yeah.
turn into something
Well,
not pleasant.
And you remember they would let us on the TV show when we did it for 5 years, we would be ourselves and do the scene. And then the famous deal is, can you do that again?
Yeah.
And so at first we tried, which they never ran
For
it.
safety.
Yeah, but after a while, they would say, "Can you do that again?" I said, "No." And we moved on. That was all of that. But can you imagine them saying,
Yeah.
"Can you do that again?" after you just ate that whole pot of beans?
Ooh.
I mean,
They had to make
Hey,
Hey, and you know something else, Dad? The around the world, because I've done a little travel, people around the world, you know, some countries do, but they're not in love with coffee as much as it is here. You know, you find it like in South America and some of the
South America,
you know, like
it
Caribbean
is.
islands.
It is. They have.
It
they
is.
drink a
It's
lot of
big.
coffee.
but Phil, what
They do.
happened?
But you go
Go
it's
ahead.
tea in Europe. You know, they're
Yeah.
all tea drinkers. You know, like hot tea.
Yeah.
I love the
They don't even
tea,
drink coffee.
but they get offended when you ask for ice, which is frustrating. You can't find ice. Can't find big filters in America. You can't find ice in Europe. No ice. And
right.
they're offended if you ask for it. But I like my tea
The
over
Asians
ice.
think that ice is a killer. Ice is a killer. No ice. None.
Yeah.
Really?
No ice on anything. It's a killer.
Well,
They
a lap of the ice would be rough.
they were like, you know, iced tea. They say that will kill you.
Well, Phil, you've defied that.
Yeah. Hey.
I drink about a gallon of that.
You're
every day.
living proof. That's not true.
Yeah.
Well, didn't you say that?
Well, it's funny. We all have.
I was going to say that micro.
I was going to say we all have ice makers, like huge
Oh, yeah.
industrial ice makers at our house.
Didn't the microbiologist tell you that the ice in the tea actually does something that enhances the taste? The radiational cooling or something?
Well, I've heard that, but I mean,
I thought you told me that.
Well, I might have.
Wasn't it Stevenson, the guy that told you that?
Yeah, somebody told me that. Gave me that info.
Okay. Well, you want to get us the coffee? And I'm going to tell you about, look, I got my cup. I got a Yeti cup right beside the, you want to make the coffee? We'll just keep going while you get the coffee.
Yep, all
I
right.
mean, the coffee's made. I was going to tell you about my trip, unless you have something else planned, Al.
No, I'm just laughing because we're the only podcast in America that opens up talking about Western coffee, and then Dad gets up and goes and make coffee during the podcast.
Well, Phil,
Nobody else is doing this.
no, I made the coffee. He just, he was so wound up about the Westerns And he had noticed that, which I'm glad he's off the news. I said that this morning. One of my metal detecting buddies sent me a picture of what he had found this Saturday, and it was he found a couple of old coins, and we had this big contraption. I said, "What is that?" And he said, "Not every day do you find a manure spreader at an old house." And I said, "Well, you can find that every day by watching the news."
Well,
Pretty good.
I thought it
That was
fun.
clever.
I'm off.
Here, I'm gonna get my cup. now.
I have boycotted. I would say 98% of all sports, all news media, all TV shows, meaning newscast. No, I couldn't take any more of it, so I just retreated. Now, we down here in the South, throw the coronavirus in. You want to? That's fine with me. Or throw the recent election, and which I thought was a bummer. But I just boycotted all of it, and it occurred to me that the centerpiece of all old Western. You say, so what actually do you watch? All the episodes that Matt Dillon made, Gunsmoke.
Is this Gunsmoke? Okay.
Gunsmoke.
That's classic.
They've got it going. It's still making money to this day. But I noticed in all Western movies, I only watch the Westerns 99% of the time. Old Westerns. You pretty well know how they're going to end. It's always good and evil. And the vast majority of the time, the good win and the evil loses in nearly every one of them. And it's the same thing there. But the centerpiece of all of them is what I have in my hand right here. There's not a Western I know of that does not have multiple scenes of individuals drinking coffee as the West was being tamed. In other words, the eras from the Comanches are flying by. You're over there behind some rocks, but it all started when y'all were just sitting there having a cup of coffee.
All right, I'm gonna see if that's true.
I mean, drinking coffee. So what I'm trying to figure out is, I know how we get it. We order it from people, and they send in Black Rifles with us. We're with them, and the coffee. But how in the world did they get that much coffee? Because as it's portrayed
Across the West?
in Westerns, we're going to drink coffee at least 10 times during the making of this 2-hour film. We're going to have a lot of scenes where they're sitting around a coffee pot.
I'm embarrassed that I missed that.
Every fight you ever see where people are hurt, it's a fist fight. The coffee pot's in the middle of it. It's getting knocked over. It's thrown in somebody's face. Coffee is the centerpiece of all Westerns.
All right, I'm gonna look. I watched an old Western last night.
So in reality, do they have a wagon train that's hauling this coffee as they tamed the West? Because they all had it. Or did they just get it each town? They got them a 50-pound bag because, we got 20 drovers out there working the cattle. And every time they look up, they come over there to the wagon, and the cook there, he's always a strange acting fella, but they all have beans. They eat beans and drink coffee. That's what won the West: coffee and beans.
I'm with you.
I'm convinced. You're
I
right.
started watching an old Western last night. It was a Spanish Western. They talked English, but it half English, half Spanish.
Was there any coffee drinking scenes?
Well, here's what happened. The first 5 minutes, I turned it on. I didn't think I was sleepy, but I turned it on, and it was this old boy, and he was at a bullfight. That's kind of how it started. And then there was a prisoner they had with just his neck, from the neck up, out of the ground. They had buried him, and they were setting all the stages. And then the guy who was at the bullfight, now he's at a poker game, and well, he noticed he was looking at the dice, kept rolling the same numbers. So the dealer, he got his pistol out, and he handed him a glass of water. So it wasn't coffee. And he said, "Drink this." And then as he was fixed to drink it, because the guy was looking around like, what? He dropped the 2 dice in the cup. And so the guy's drinking the water, and the dice are like, he's struggling, and he gets them in his mouth, but he's like, he said, open your mouth. So he had his pistol, and he shoved those dice, like, and so they were setting, I thought it was a great scene, though. You don't see Westerns like that anymore, and that's what I was going to say. What happened to the modern Western? When's the last time you seen a great Western?
Well,
They quit making them.
They did. They quit making them.
I would tell you how this ended.
Let's take a break. So, Jase, you mentioned this, that there's a lot of reasons why people are stressed out. Is that a fair thing to say?
These are stressing times,
just in general.
Yeah.
And now that you and I have been on the road a little bit, we really see the stress, in terms of air travel and everything else. I mean, it's an interesting time. Well, one of the things you don't want to be stressed out about is male pattern baldness or receding hairline. You don't want to be stressed out about that. And yet people do, right? So the good news is we have one of our longtime sponsors that's going to help you out. It's called Keeps. And basically what they do is they have a doctor-recommended, FDA-approved hair loss treatment, and it's not expensive. It's a lot cheaper than some of the other stuff that's out there. So they want you to be able to keep your hair and not be stressed out about it. So basically you go to their website, keeps.com, that's KEEPS.com, and they're going to have a licensed doctor. They're going to take a few pics of your hair. They're going to review your info, and basically they're going to give you a recommendation. You're going to ship it straight to your door, so you don't have to go anywhere. It's a pretty good deal. It's keeps.com/door. You get 50% off your first order, which is cool. Keeps.com/door, 50% off, and don't be stressed about your hair.
I would tell you how this ended, but 5 minutes later I was asleep, and when I woke up, the credits were coming.
Yeah.
So I need to watch them.
Well, you take Matt Dillon, Gunsmoke, you might as well get ready. When you watch these 30-minute little shows, they always had coffee, and they always had whiskey. Whiskey and coffee. That put together, that combo won the West.
But I think
Coffee and whiskey.
Well, I think they were doing that to, what's the word? To be an apposition. Because if you drink too much whiskey, you need some coffee. Counterbalance. That's what I was looking for.
Well, it might have been.
Well, let me
Well,
give
you remember that? So they would come into town. You'd have the cowpokes, and then they would come into town to get provisions. And while they were in town, they'd slip over to the saloon. So they had their coffee they were taking back to the camp, but they were getting them a little hooch at the old saloon. That was kind of the setup for.
You got to remember, Phil. Back then, the average life expectancy was probably like 38.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure.
I don't know whether the whiskey finally got them.
I think the whiskey
or
got
too
'em.
much coffee, or both, a combo of both. But it was a lifestyle of get up in the morning, hit the coffee. When the sun goes down, get on the whiskey.
Well, I'm going to make you feel better today because the reason you stop watching the news and all that, you have these moments in life that you just feel like are a profound moment that's a game changer. Al, you preached on that yesterday, which was spectacular.
It was really good.
Oh, did you see the sermon?
I
Yeah,
saw the sermon.
I showed it to. I wanted Dad to see it too, because since I did his video in it.
Well, that was
Yeah.
was that a off your show in the woods?
Yeah.
Yes,
I might
in
start
the
watching
woods.
that. I didn't know that's the kind of stuff y'all were doing. That was excellent.
Oh,
And I thought it was a creative way to share, especially in our modern world and people watching online. I mean, that was riveting. And I knew that we had researched that chapter on the podcast, which is helping you
Right.
preach because some of our
'cause you notice
ideas.
I put your
Oh yeah, you did.
I put your questions in there, which are really good.
Well, and you focused on another one that I didn't, which, by the way, I had written down, which was the why question, which was amazing when you did that part. It was awesome.
I am,
thought it was phenomenal.
I have found myself at 74, and I'll be 75 in April if I make it that long. If I have no aches or pains anywhere in my body, Maybe coffee has something to do with that. Who knows? No no pharmaceuticals, none, zero, no pills from a local drugstore, none. I'm off of that. I'm like, no, I'm going
You're
without
off the news and pills. We're
So
learning a
the
lot
pills
about
are
you,
gone, and any kind of political wrangling, any kind of political wrangling on any of the news media, none.
Okay.
Don't take in that. Don't ingest that. So I have found myself at 74, boys, completely and utterly wrapped in Jesus, the Son of God.
That's good.
His story. It convicted me. Jumping off of Saul of Tarsus, you say, what a change in a man's thinking.
Amazing.
And he's allowed, being an ex-murderer, persecutor of the nth degree, he's allowed to God speaking through him through the Spirit to write down most of what we read in the Bible, nearly all of the New Testament. You just wouldn't have thought God would pick out that kind of person. It is a riveting read.
Well, Jase, hey, Jase, let me plug to the audience where they can find what you're talking about. So he's talking about a sermon I preached yesterday. If you go to wfrchurch.org, you can watch that sermon. And it was called from name changer to game changer.
Let me give you a better plug than that. Look, I will guarantee if you go watch that, you will thank me. It was awesome. Even though we're brothers, and Al will tell you if he lays an egg, I'll tell him. I was like, not one of your best. That was spectacular. So
would you call it laying an egg?
Yeah, sometimes you lay an egg.
I haven't heard that terminology.
You do a lot of a lot of preaching. You're going to lay a few eggs. But let me mention though on Dad's. Well, I don't either. So Dad is in the Woods with Phil, which is on Blaze TV, which is his show. He did a 2-parter on this same thing, and I showed a little bit of those episodes in my sermon. But I loved it. The Cade and those guys are real creative. The name of Dad's episodes are Better Not Call Me Saul. And for those in the audience, you two won't know it, but there was a show called Better Call Saul, or I think it was Better Call Saul.
Okay, that's so he did a little creative thing. That's a little cheesy, but
but it was creative.
But since the name of your lesson is, what was it? Game changer to
from name changer to game changer.
Oh, name changer to game, because he went from Saul to Paul. Okay, I'm just now getting that out. But that was spectacular. Very well done. But look, I had some good news that we got to chase some rabbits here, and I think goose egg is the zero. When you have the goose lay an egg, zero.
I got you.
Yeah,
I got you.
Oh, a zero.
Yeah,
okay.
That's it. Hit me. So I wanted to give you some good news. I think maybe the last time I was here, or time before, I told about the trip that I took that was not good. My troubles with the airlines.
Oh yeah, the flight.
I do want to report that when they said you're not going to get a refund, I said keep it. They actually fully refunded everything. I don't know if they heard the podcast.
And your advice was keep it.
I said keep it because they didn't want to let me off the plane. So I just wanted to say I appreciate the refund. Awesome, great. You didn't have to do that. I was getting off the plane. But anyway, it was a depressing story, and I gave you the pulse of what I thought America at that moment. It was filled with fear and a lot of anger, and people were just coming unhinged. I just took another trip, and I wanted to share this, and it's really good news. I went to Lake City, Florida, which they said was known as the gateway to Florida. My opening line was, "Enter through the small gate." I thought it was funny. They didn't laugh, but when I said I thought that was funny, they didn't laugh. But here's what I want to report. I had no problems getting there. And so I get there, and they do, how it goes. We do a little VIP meet and greet, and the people just kept coming. And I thought, where are these people coming from? Because I was expecting in this age of coronavirus and the fears and the last trip I took that I just didn't think it would be a big crowd. And I go out to the arena after the meet and greet, which was a lot of people. and this place is packed. There were over 800 people in the arena that seated 800, and I'm not sure how many other people were around. Let's call it 1,000. There were 0 masks. None. And this place was raucous in a good way. I mean, raucous. They had a phenomenal worship team, contemporary worship group, sang Graves in the Gardens. You people that listen to this kind of music, you know. Well, that I heard that. I was back in the green room. They sang one song I wasn't familiar with. And then I heard the old, I searched the world. I'm like, let's go right now. So I went out there.
What part of the United States were you in?
I would say north to central Florida. I'm not sure where
Florida.
Lake City is. Yeah, Lake City, Florida. I said that.
Which explains why there was freedom there, Jase. Florida, DeSantis opened up Florida pretty much, full throttle a pretty good while back, and they've been doing great. I mean, they've got the population centers just like New York and California, but he realized that you don't have to just stay locked down all the time. He was one of the original ones. Hey, Jase, let's take another break. I'm one of those I don't know if it's because I'm the oldest in the family, Jason. I don't know if you're like this or not, but I love, when I find old pictures of, when we were young, or especially, old pictures of Granny and Pa, and just kind of stuff that, I hadn't seen in years and years, and then kind of talking about that kind of. Are you like that, or are you just nah?
Once I go down the road, find the picture box, I go through them all, and because you're just remembering.
That's the one thing you miss now, because most people's pictures are on their phone. And you don't have that. Well, one of the things I think I love about that is because I like knowing about old stories and kind of where we came from and that sort of thing. I've always been super intrigued by that. And one of our sponsors, Ancestry.com, obviously that's their whole thing. I mean, you can find out about your background, your heritage, where you came from, what percentage, or where you're from in the world. And it's just really interesting. Of course, in our case, it's also very meaningful to us because we also found out we had a sister, and it came because of them. It came because they were looking up some heritage and basically found the Robertsons, right? Yeah. So if you want to check these guys out, reveal your ethnic origin, historical details about your family, really interesting stuff. You get you an Ancestry DNA kit, and you go to Ancestry.com/Phil. That's Ancestry.com/Phil, and you're going to get a free trial to check out where you came from.
I wasn't aware of that, but I did want to say this, Phil. Look, this event, they were, I think, raising money they have an outdoor ministry where they take teenagers and young people and they go to the outdoors and they hike and boat. And I watched a little video of it, and they try to share Jesus with them. I mean, okay. And for that many people to show up, which I looked at the guy putting it on, I was like, where'd all these people come from?
Well, here's what I can't figure. When all this started, the coronavirus comes out of China, and the havoc that it wreaked across the world. I said at the time on the Blaze TV that it came from China. It comes from bats, these cave bats. They know that. We know that much. And it either accidentally or on purpose came out of one of these Chinese germ warfare labs, accidentally or on purpose. That's the way I left it.
But you got that from the news, so who knows?
Well, yeah. So I just looked enough to say, well, that came out of China. Yeah. What I can't figure out,
that's true,
is I didn't wear a mask at any time. I never had a mask on.
But Phil, you're not you're in the
you never went anywhere.
I'm just telling you the quandrum that I have noticed. I never wore a mask. I never caught the virus. Somebody said, well, you might have had it, but you didn't. No.
Yeah.
Some doctor showed up. Somebody sent him down there. I didn't call for him. I didn't know he was coming. So this doctor rolls in. He said, Phil, some of your family members or somebody sent me down here to see if you you and Miss Kay are doing okay.
Yeah.
So he sticks this thing up my nose and gets a swab, takes a little blood from my arm. He said, I'll get back with you in a couple of days on this. 2 days later, he said, we swabbed you. We got blood out of you. You've never had coronavirus. You don't have coronavirus now. And he said, so I think you're good to go. Well, I didn't put on a mask after that. Only time I would meet with anybody is the sons and daughters of God. Go there, give them some words of encouragement like we do here, and then I'm on back to the house. I never caught it.
Yeah.
I'm just looking at it saying,
look, I was for the mask, during when we were trying to figure all this out. But at this point, I mean, we're here. But I wanted to finish my story. Look, when I go to that event, the first person in line is a 10-year-old kid with his mom in the VIP room. Big smile on his face, had a suit and tie. Comes up to me. I was like, boy, you got the front row. How did you get first in line? And he actually had a Duck Commander hat. And he said, I want you to sign this. And he said, do you remember me? Which it's always tough when someone says that.
We talked about that.
Yeah. I'm like, you seem familiar. Hang on. You have this hat, but we didn't sign it. He's like, well, my mom sent a request for y'all to pray for me 5 years ago because I had cancer. And I just want you to know that I'm 5 years cancer free, and I wanted to thank y'all for praying for me. Well,
there you go.
Well, I got kind of misty eyed, and
verklempt.
I stopped the proceedings, and we had a talk, and I wrote Matthew 19:26. I couldn't remember I was having a brain cramp, so I had to go get my Bible, and I'm looking it up. I said, I'm gonna give you a little word today, and it's that verse that says, with man this is impossible. They were talking about how hard it was for.
So the kid motivated you.
Yeah. Well, I just thought, well, this is why I'm here. Let's get that out of the way. I don't know what's fixing to happen, but this is awesome. His name was Mason. And so we had this moment, and then I go out there. Of course, I'm the energy from the people that were excited, and all the people. I probably met 250 people in the VIP line, and they were just all excited and happy. And so I introduced Mason in my opening 1 minute. He was sitting on the front row, and his mom, and I told him what happened. And I said, here we are, and people wonder this is dangerous, all of you gathered up in this close proximity. And I could tell during the worship, a third of the people were worshiping with just no regard to anything in life. I mean, just they were getting it. And I'd say 2/3, I deducted either they come from a more conservative church or they don't have a church. Because I could tell they were noticeably uncomfortable about this many people. And so I kind of went through that a little bit. I was like, don't feel awkward or nervous. We're just excited. And I went through the benefits of being in Jesus. I brought up the resurrection. I brought up Mason in that we pray. Now, the world may say, he just got lucky. Or, fantastic doctors, which, look, we do appreciate the medical world, but we also look at this in his mind. He's like, I had some fine doctors, and I got members of the Duck Commander crew to pray for me, and I'm healed. I want to thank God,
While you're there,
y'all and the doctors.
While you're there,
Yeah,
a lot of letters are poured in. I want everybody to understand. It's 350 million of us here. Just think about it now for a while in the computer world and all that, which I'm to this day, I'm never on the cell phone, never clicked on a computer. So I'm not searching.
No news, no political wrangling.
Yeah, I'm not searching the internet to find out what you said, good or bad. None of that. I don't have it. But I will say, every time these letters come in, the names change, but the stories are all the same. I'm tangled up over here. I was tangled up over there. I'm fixing to be tangled up over. There's a lot of... There's diseases, there's early deaths, there's early trouble. there's alcohol, there's drugs, there's this and that and the other. Just remember, we are praying for these people. I want all the listeners to say, we pray for them on a regular. I personally pray for them on a regular basis. Yep. I know y'all do too. And just like that story you talked about, the kid, there's been how many stories like that? Yeah. So all of you out there in computer land, just remember, it's a lot of people with a lot of troubles, and we're on the earth, and we're hearing about immortality here. We're pointing you to the one who can give you life and immortality.
Well, that's what I was going to say.
Get you past death. You don't have to fear that. But just remember, you said, well, I wonder if they would say something and if they would answer me. There's too many of you. There's too many of you. So look, our lifestyle is regular prayer on your behalf for your uncles, the ones who's on booze and too much. We're trying to help him. He's an alcoholic. We're praying for all of you. As much as we can, all the time, we're aware of what's going on out there. Just know that. But we can't get contact each one of you.
Phil, they're not going to be offended. What you got, Al?
I was just going to say, let's take a break.
All right, well, let me finish my story. So here's what I think. Because then I led that into sharing Jesus to the crowd. It was well received. And it made me think, from the world, this seems ridiculous. I mean, I'm sure they're like, you're putting these people at risk. And I'm like, putting people at risk? I just got a 5-year-old kid who's now 10 who has gone all in on people that have prayed for him. And now we have all these people that have gathered from all across this community. And we're talking about things that are way more impressive than the things that cause the fear, the panic, the anger. And so what it made me do is, after that trip, I thought, because I realized that when I shared this story, I would probably get raked over the coals, for like, oh, I cannot believe y'all are all gathering up that close together, worshiping God, wink, wink. I mean, this is ridiculous, you people. But we believe this. So I was just thinking, what are the greatest American accomplishments? You think about coming up with a vaccine for this, and you're like, it's great. But when you think in the history of America, I thought that's something I need to Google. So I did. And what do you think they were? The top 10 greatest accomplishments in America. Let's see how many of y'all name.
Well, the ability to break the sound barrier on fast-moving aircraft.
Yep,
aircraft. We just got off the ground in about 1908.
There was a couple with aircraft related. All right, so you got 2 of them right
100
there.
years from the Wright brothers to
Went to the
go
moon.
to Mars.
That was number 1, going to the moon.
Went to the moon.
Yep. Anything else? The internet was actually on there.
Yep.
So you mentioned that.
Car
was like number 3.
Yep.
Breakthroughs with medical technology.
Yep. Phone. A few medical. There was one, I think, when it said,
the cell phone, which replaced the walkie-talkie. That's a giant step upward.
So you got the gist of it.
They say.
So look, I took the 10. Here's my point. You take the 10 greatest accomplishments. You only have to read 3 or 4 verses. We put our faith and trust. If you take each of those issues, you're talking about calling people. Our last podcast, he just came over and saw. He didn't need a phone. He just spoke, and they thought it was thunder. I would say, compared to a cell phone, this is not even something you can wrap your head around.
This is, yeah.
So you say, the planes. He's literally transporting and leaving and going to places we can't even see. And when you finally get to the moon, he made that and has made hundreds of them throughout the universe. So I'm like, when we get together and we worship God and we celebrate him answering prayer, and when we introduce Jesus and realize that transformation in their life can happen, and I mean That's something that, sure, you can go to 12-step groups and you can do things and get counseling, but we've all seen the power of Jesus being shared and the transformation that happened, and sometimes in an instant. You know, I think about Mac Owen. I mean, he goes from just drug crazed, bam, and now, you know, he leads one of the biggest groups of helping people overcome that years later. And you say, what happened? Introduction to Jesus. So all I'm saying is, when you look at it from that perspective, I mean, it just warmed my soul. I'm like, now this is the group that I want to be a part of. This right here, to me, it was a little touch of heaven of us, despite all the pandemonium going out there in the world. For those of us who were in that crowd that night, oh, I'm telling you, it was inspiring. I felt like I levitated to the hotel room. And even in the next day, and I'm on the plane, which, you know, I'm going to tell this silly story because it was just totally different. And I tried to go to one of these little clubs when you have a long layover, because people noticed me because I had the camo and I didn't have a change of clothes, even with a mask. People, and it was getting out of hand.
You mean you get noticed when you're wearing camo and you haven't shaved or bathed in a few days?
Yeah, people know it's me.
Makes
and
sense.
So my assistant,
it happens, Jace.
My assistant said, "Go to the club." I don't know what those things are called now. What Sky Club?
It's an airline club.
Yeah, you go in
Sky
there
Club.
and you pay. I didn't know what it cost. Well, it cost $75, which I was like, whoa. So here we go again. Take two. You have to have an American Express card that I still don't have to get in the club. I'm trying the old debit card again. Al.
Jase, I was about to say you're going to have a credit card, because Lisa and I go into them all the time. Hang on, let's take one last break before you tell the story.
So now I'm.
Why is this battle never ending?
Well,
because I don't have them. Y'all are talking
because you don't go anywhere.
over a debit card.
This is good
Why
news,
not just
Phil.
call the debit card and get what you need?
But you gotta remember, I'm levitating on the power of the Spirit in this experience, right? So I had a shirt on. You know that yellow shirt that I wear, that I think my wife designed, that has the cross and it says "I am," and it has a verse there. I think it's John 8 or John 5.
Yeah.
It
was John 8 where he said, "Before Abraham was born, I am."
Yeah, that's it. It has that. Well, I had that shirt on. Well, I didn't notice I had that shirt on. So the woman, an older African American woman, she's sitting there, and I'm like trying to give her the card, and she's like, "We can't. You can't." I was like, "Oh, well, I'll pay cash." No. I said, "Oh." She said, "But you have the right shirt on." And so I looked down, and she said, "So it's on me."
So that's more powerful than the debit card. Well,
I had a verse on my shirt, and obviously this woman believes in Jesus, and she thought, and I mean, look, she didn't know me, and I look a little rough.
It's a wonderful thing when the sons and daughters of God are together.
I looked at it and I thought, well, I appreciate it. She said, "I appreciate you wearing that." And she started quoting the verse that was on my shirt. Yep. And I thought,
now we're getting somewhere.
So I'm like, we've had a pivotal moment, a change from looking at it from the heavenly, from 30,000 feet.
Jace, your dialogue, just a reminder, on the atheist wing out there, they said, you know what they're saying? You talk about a bunch of idiots.
Oh, I know. And look, check this out. So I come back. The closest convenience store to my house, there's a guy from Europe there that I met because I always stop in there. And since I traveled to when I traveled to Ukraine, I told him about my trip, you know, because he has an accent. I mean, through the last few years, I've had many conversations with this guy, and I've befriended him. Of course, you know why? Because I want to introduce him to Jesus, and I've made little comments here and there, and so, but that's gone on for years. And so I go in the convenience store because I always want to stop at the same store right by my house, whatever, you know, and to get whatever I need it. I can't even remember now. Well, I'll go in there and I get the stuff, and he says, "Hey, I want to ask you something. My wife and I, we're thinking about coming in and visiting your church." I was like, "Really?" And so we talked about it. You'll like it. But it was just another little moment where I thought, man, why was I so upset? I mean, it's like I had one trip that it couldn't have gone any worse. And this, looking at it from a spiritual perspective, it couldn't have gone any better. And then when I get back, here's a guy that you planted the seeds. Go ahead.
I know exactly why. Because your trip last time we talked about it was to treasure hunt, and not that you bring godly things into everything, but I'm saying it was more for your own personal benefit, and everything went haywire and wrong. This one you did for God and the kingdom. This was a mission, and so therefore God blessed you every step of the way. That's what I think.
Maybe so, and I think some of it's perspective. I think when you get really excited, one of the things you can do to better yourself in Christ is go to these events where something good is going to happen in your spiritual life. I mean, Al, you remember the first time they used to have a workshop or like a conference in Tulsa that we went to, and I remember the first time I went, because to me, we're out here in the country, and our little church that Phil and them started was 50 people maybe?
Yep.
And here I am in, my later teenage years. I'm trying to follow Jesus, but you feel kind of alone when you especially go to a public school and you're trying to live for Jesus. I remember the first time I went there, and how many people would be in that arena? I don't want to misspeak. 30,000, 40, something like that?
That wouldn't be quite, about 8 to 10,000.
Oh, was it? I couldn't remember. I just remember singing "Just As I Am," which is an old hymnal from, a couple hundred years ago. I remember sitting in that arena for the first time with those thousands of people, and I'm like, you know what? This is awesome. And I got teary-eyed just thinking, this is, we believe in this, and it's good and true and holy, but there is some power in that. And I had the same feeling a couple of years ago when Missy and we took Mia, went to a worship conference in Nashville. It just, and especially everything that we've been through with the coronavirus and everybody being alone, and boy, I'm just telling you, I mean, that was a long story to say that trip was phenomenal. I mean, I am fired up, and I thank the people who were there in Lake City.
I made the same, I noticed that, Jase. I've been noticing even at our church, because, we've been meeting back for a pretty good while, but even meeting just like part of a group, and we're in this big room that normally holds, 4 times as many people as are there. And, and most time our church has been fairly open about not really super worried about the virus, other than, some aren't, depending on their circumstances. But I've just noticed it's hard to get that, what you're describing, that excitement, enthusiasm, because it's awkward. You're not sure. Somebody has a mask, somebody doesn't. Am I making them uncomfortable? And so I think now that we're kind of advancing along, and with the vaccinations, I guess, I mean, it just feels like, to me, it feels like the old spirit is back. Like yesterday when I was preaching, people were responding, during the sermon. They were laughing more. It was just like, it just felt like they were more, even our worship yesterday on both sides just seemed so phenomenal. I mean, people just, I think there's a relaxing of that about people getting together. I think you're exactly right.
Isaiah came up with an interesting, I read this yesterday. This was part of my lesson. And I was, the old AC/DC movie, Highway to Hell, the song they made, there's roads you get on and paths you take. Isaiah, 700 and some odd years before Jesus, said, a highway will be there, these for the redeemed. A highway will be there. It will be called, check this out, Jay, which you're on 2,000 years later, same road. It will be called the way of holiness. The unclean will not journey on it. It will be for those who walk in the way. Wicked fools will not go about on it.
Where's that? Isaiah 35?
Isaiah
That's a good
35.
one.
Pretty cool.
Well, it reminds me of when Jesus said, don't worry about the one who can kill the body, but the body and the soul.
Yep.
And look, we took our precautions. We tried to help people out, especially the elders, during this whole process. But you got to remember, there's something of greater importance out there that everyone on the planet needs more than a vaccine, and it's, a cure for the soul and the heart.
Yep.
And the Holy Spirit can not only, heal, but also redeem and resurrect. So anything involving that, it's just more appealing. It's more appealing to me. And look, if you told me you're risking your life by doing it, and all those people are risking your life and other lives, I think it's worth the risk.
Saul of Tarsus.
I think you're right.
Apostle Paul.
So to quote the great local preacher Ernie Miles from years past, Jase, the clock on the wall says, "That's all, y'all."
Thanks for listening to the Unashamed podcast. Help us out by rating us on iTunes. And don't miss an episode by subscribing on YouTube, and be sure to click that little bell to get notified about new episodes. And for even more content that you won't get anywhere else, subscribe to Blaze TV at blazetv.com/unashamed.